Hey guys, Jarretman here, back with some more poker. Some more 500 zoom. Hope everyone's doing well. Again, I'm hoping that this pool doesn't die. So this is the third time I've seen this guy open to 5 big blinds. I'm going to 3-bet non-all in and then call a jam versus the 50 big blind stack. Table 1, blind versus blind 3-bet pot. We will call a reasonable bet on the flop. Even like pot size is close, but I think we fold versus pot size. I think we're gonna fold versus this jam. Yeah, we're gonna fold versus this jam, regardless of what the button does. So we could raise on table 1 even, but I think this hand really just wants to call. All we accomplish when we raise is to make his worst king X and queen X fold. I'm not sure what we do on the turn versus a bet like this. I think jamming is pretty reasonable. I think calling is also reasonable, obviously. I think I'm just gonna call. I think we want a little bit more equity and a little bit more of the domination effect. And I don't think we have any leads on this river. I don't think we have any flush advantage on this river. I think on the turn we do maybe still have some 5x, but even our 5x is starting to not exist really. Okay. Unlucky river for us. We can call sometimes here on table 2. I think we're gonna do both actually versus that cold 4-bet size. We're gonna bet here on table 1. This hand performs really well as a bet. So table 2, I'm gonna play half pot or check, and I think kings in general is the pair that wants to check the least here. On a 24, it might be close. Close between checking and betting. Gonna start with a check on table 1. A spot where, you know, technically we should be doing a lot of checking. Table 2 is really close as well. Gonna be the nitty. Going to do the nitty action and fold. I'm gonna do something a little bit cheeky here versus the recreational player. If I remember correctly, this player calls very wide pre-flop, so he has a lot of worse hands that can still call us down. It's not like, you know, he could show up with ace-9 off, for example, or queen-7 suited, yeah. But if I bet any bigger than what I bet, I don't think I can get called by enough hands. So table 2, I think we just have to fold. It doesn't matter, we have some backdoors. And then table 1 is close between betting and checking. On a 50, I'm gonna check it back. Do we ever fold a pair plus a straight draw versus the 2x pot here? I don't hate his line. I'm going to fold, even though I'm pretty sure we don't fold that. I think his overbet's a little bit too big, but I think his line is fine. Like check overbet in that spot is definitely okay. And we're gonna check give up the king 6 suited. We have the 6 of hearts and the king of hearts. Both cards are not really that good to barrel, and still on the river, most of the big blind's air is going to be heart hands. So we're just blocking his snap folds with king 6 suited. The fact that the board is double draw makes me think that like using huge overbets is not that good. It's too easy for us to defend, and it doesn't accurately reflect the types of hands that you want to bet on the turn. Like playing that size as an only bet strategy would be bad, but if he's splitting, maybe that size can go in there with exactly 10-8. Maybe a hand like pocket threes. Just gonna fold the jack 7 suited versus the 66 donk. That bet does not have to be a made hand. I want at least one overcard though before I start doing anything. Like I don't hate min raise folding basically every single hand in my range there. If it wasn't for rake, I would call the queen 8 here. Jack 8 is close versus 2.2, but again, rake. Rake, no ante. Don't want to go too large versus shorter stacks when you're 3-betting, at least in my experience. And just as I say that, I didn't realize that this player has only 18 bigs. I might have limped this hand, but I don't mind opening it anyways. Usually someone who has 16 bigs is not playing a proper short stack strategy. And now this is actually really close on the flop, because even when we are ahead, any one of his hands that jams does have equity. And we're going to check give up on table 2. Yeah, that one's really close with the ace-4. So I'm going to bet 1/3 bluff the river here. I'm not doing this as I think it's something that is necessarily the correct theory thing to do. I just think that the line performs well versus a recreational. I think there's a lot of hands that can float the turn, fold the river from a recreational's perspective, and I don't think that I'm getting jammed on enough from the recreational, because hands that want to jam the turn usually will have bet the flop from a recreational. Not going to play any raises on table 1, so we just have easiest call of all time, and we'll just be stacking off on basically every run out that doesn't have a queen or an ace. There's some exceptions, of course. No reason to 3-bet here on table 2 despite having 99. I mean, if you know that the turn is going to be the queen of diamonds, then go ahead. Table 2 with the flush draw, I don't think we ever want to jam our hand. I think ace jack, no flush draw, wants to jam the turn sometimes. This hand just wants to call, and then again, we'll definitely call that river, but... And then on table 2, we're just going to let him go. Let him go with spazzes I mean, in this case, he actually had a real hand. That one's just a cooler. But I think there's more value in just letting them bluff off than there is jamming the turn for whatever, protection or scared of a bad river card. Table 1, I don't think there's any reason to bet any other size except all in. Like betting half your stack quarter pot, I don't think is ever a thing here. And we're gonna bluff literally everything that isn't like a jack, I think, on that river. Maybe 10s checks back. 10s and 9s maybe check back. But even those like are candidates to go all in if you have a spade, I think. And then I think we still fold ace-9 off even versus 9.5. If you start facing very, very small 3-bet sizes, like let's say he went to 7.5, you'd be surprised at how wide you need to defend in position. Or how wide you are allowed to defend, rather. Table 1, there's a lot of different ways to play this board. In earlier positions, I like to play big, better, check. Button versus big blind, I prefer to do a high frequency 1/3. I'm gonna check range on table 2. And yeah, our bottom of value, I guess, would be a hand like ace king, ace queen with the queen of spades. I think ace queen without the queen of spades is probably checking back. It's like very, very close. Even though you're almost always good, you've got to be called by worse, and he's going to be check over folding that spot, so. Okay. You got me, Maxim. I don't know what to do versus this size. But I imagine being deeper makes this type of hand even worse out of position, even versus a min raise. And it's pretty low in terms of hand value anyways. Like if you look at the types of hands that we open, that's got to be in like the bottom 15% easily. So I think because we're at a position there, we do get to have a folding range. It's not like some other spots where if someone chooses a bad size, you basically don't have to fold any hands. 9-3 suited is close. On the 500 zoom rake structure, I believe it actually gets folded. But it's like the complete borderline. I'm gonna limp the 4-2 versus the recreational, even though he's short. I think it's not that hard to make it profitable. And then this board, I see no reason to ever check. We don't really care if we get jammed on with 2-4. So queen jack off will call sometimes, fold sometimes. Again, being 140 big blinds deep, this hand becomes slightly worse. And on a 40, I think we're gonna fold. So again, a lot of options on table 2 for what strategy you want to use. The simplest and easiest, of course, is to bet high frequency, small size. I think big better check performs really well in practice. But again, it's kind of like pick your poison. The EV differences there are relatively nominal. You can even split that flop if you want. I mean, you can split every flop if you want. You have some hands on that board that really want to bet big. You have some hands on that board that really want to bet, but they don't want to bet big. Table 2, the king high region of our range wants to bet, I would say, the least, especially the king high that doesn't have anything going for it, like not even the 8 of diamonds or something like that. Table 1, I think we're going to check raise this some of the time. Maybe even like very high frequency. Checking table 2. It's actually really close, but I think this hand is going to get in here. I think having a 2 is better than having like king 6 or king 5, because the 2 doesn't block as many of his folds. Because he has ace 5 off that he opens on the button, for example, but he doesn't open ace 2 off, both of which would be folds versus the raise. So I think king 2 just gets in there. We're going to call on table 2, but it's not fun. I wouldn't even be surprised if my hand is close to indifferent on basically every river, and potentially even close to indifferent on the turn. Yeah, it's a good size and good line. So the 8 is okay. It's kind of like a neutral blocker. I don't think using this hand as a bluff makes much sense because he never can have ace king or kings. I think we'd rather use a hand that has a 2 or at least a jack. I'm gonna fold on the 37. I do think we have to call this sometimes though. Definitely call it sometimes. I don't think it's that hard to find bluffs in this line either. Like, if you can find a bluff on the turn, then you can find a bluff on the river. We're a bit deeper, so I kind of like 3-betting the 6-5 suited a little bit more than I like doing anything else with it. Okay, so table 1, in general, my approach here is going to be to simplify as much as possible. And I do think that despite how the board looks, we have to do a lot of checking. And the deeper we are in this board, the more we have to check. And all of that put together, I don't even mind range checking this board. I doubt you lose much EV. If this was like king 10 4 rainbow and we were under the gun versus button, then I would rather just range bet small. But I think here, and we're going to go for the check call. I think his size is a little bit too small. I think going for something more like pot or 75 is better. Half can't be bad though. Very, very small differences in anything. So I think on 50, we're still going to bet. It's close though. Ace Jack wants to do both. And then on table 1, we're going to call, but this size makes no sense. This half pot barrel makes no sense here. He really wants to play like a super big bet or check strategy. Like what's he saying he has that wants to bet half pot? Basically nothing. And then on table 2, we are going to bet 66 and no leads on table 1. 66 and call off, I think, with ace jack, and then we would fold like ace 9 of hearts. Is that a thing? I don't know. My guess is he has something that he shouldn't be betting on the turn, like ace 10. Yeah, exactly, ace 10. Ace 10 of spades, though. I mean, that can overbet the turn. Betting the flop with ace 10 of spades, sure. It's good. Like, we have lots of worse 10x to call him. But then the half pot bet on the turn just makes no sense. However, all that considered, I don't think we ever want to raise king jack. There's a lot of stack depth remaining and a lot of different rivers that we're gonna have to play, and I don't think king jack really makes it into the check raising range. If he had overbet, I think we can stab all these pairs some of the time here on table 2. It's kind of like you can think of it if you want to as like having a set draw. So yeah, if you know your opponent is doing bad splitting, on the turn here, so like just sizing their hand all the time and not, you know, picking good sizes, then you can start doing some crazy things like check raising king jack. But then, you know, it's very easy to start leveling yourself, because even if they're doing this bad hand splitting, they can still find some hands to put into the other sizes some of the time, and they can find 3-bets. Like, I think this player could potentially find 3-bets with a hand like this. So then you raise fold the turn with king jack. You know, you kind of start leveling yourself. I'm gonna fold versus that guy in the 3x open, and we're gonna check back with 6s here. Versus the size, king jack off is actually close, but 150 big blinds deep, not as close as well, and definitely not versus the cold 4-bet. So I feel like even though it's a cold 4-bet spot, I think the big blind needs to be very careful on this board. And yeah, definitely have some checks. I think the imposition size is slightly too big. I think you want to go a bit smaller here than a third, even though they did start a little bit deeper. So maybe that's wrong. Then imposition's bottom of value here, I guess, should be a hand like ace queen that could float the flop, stab the turn. Really, he's saying he has a full house straight, pocket aces, or a hand like 8-7 suited when he goes all in on the river, though. He's never going to shove a hand like jacks or 10s as a bluff. His bluffs need to come from 6s and 7s, I think. I think his range is running so dry on... You can have a check back range on table 2 if you want. I think his check back with king queen is... It looks silly, but I think it's fine, actually. I think it's like right on the cusp of being able to go all in. And yeah, for bluffs, he's going to just have... I don't know if he needs to turn 6s and 7s. Maybe he has enough hands like ace jack of diamonds that can float the flop versus quarter. Or ace 10 of diamonds that can float the flop versus quarter. King jack of diamonds, maybe. That can now go all in on this river. I think if I was in the button's shoes, I would still shove 6s and 7s. After betting 1/3 on the turn. Yeah, I don't know. King Queen must be super close there. That's actually an interesting spot. I'm going to take a look at that one later. Did I have that hand? Did I have that hand? I think that Cell Jack actually played it fine as well. Can definitely consider checking jacks on the flop though. If you want to play a very small checking range built around like pure check give ups like my hand, I think that's fine. I think betting range is simpler. So we're gonna call on table 1. The size is okay. Usually when I see this size, it's people sizing their hand, and not because they constructed a good range built around, bet 75 or check, or built around splitting the flop. Usually it's a hand like I have 9s, 10s, or jacks, and I want to bet this size because that's the size that this hand wants to bet. And we just fold the turn now. And so, like, with that logic, maybe even folding 6s is reasonable on the flop. I'm not going to play that hand all the time on the button. Pretty good flop for my hand and decent flop for my range. The king of hearts, queen of hearts, and 10 of hearts blocks more of the button's flushes than it does of the big blind's flushes. So I end up with a flush advantage on this board. My hand can check or bet, obviously. And on a 63, I think we're going to bet. The side card considerations do matter a little bit, but overall it's not super important. I think it is important to do both with basically all of your flushes. Your range is going to want to be mostly checking this turn, despite the flop going check check and you having a flush advantage. So 8-7 suited can low frequency squeeze, but it mainly wants to call. Suited broadways get moved into like the pure squeeze region. Hands that just really push equity. Check raise is interesting on table 1. I'm not sure how often he would ever stab 7s for that size on the flop, so I'm not sure how relevant my 7 of spades blocker is actually. But like, what else are we gonna check raise? Might as well block the low frequency pocket 7s he can have. I don't think anyone's ever, let me rephrase that, I don't think this type of player, from what I've seen, is the type to check back pocket 9s, or a 9 rather. So I think a lot of his range is a hand like ace jack, ace 10. Do I want to try to get this player to fold an ace? Seems ambitious. The pool is in danger of dying here. We're a little bit deeper, so I'm going to size up a little bit. And yeah, I'm gonna add in a 200 zoom. Just so we can get more hands in. Oops. That's okay. On a 95, we're going to 3-bet this. With the rake and versus that raise size, I believe ace-6 actually gets folded some of the time. If I didn't have the backdoor, I think I would just pure check my hand on the flop here on table 1, but I think with the backdoor on a 99, like on a high roll and a very, very high roll, we will bet. I think that's fine. I think that still this hand wants to mainly check. And now we have a very easy give up on table 1. Potentially could be some rivers that we bluff. Like an 8 or a 10. I think those would be pretty reasonable. Having the ace of spades is pretty bad to bet the turn. And it's even bad to bet the river. Yeah, I think on a 10 we can bluff. So we're gonna have two sizes on the river here. We have a size for a jack that would be, actually we might have even more than two sizes here. We might even have some very big sizes. I think my hand, even though it has the 9, still goes into the bad blocker territory. So I think that when you have a hand that wants to bluff but has relatively bad blockers, it usually goes into the smaller sizing. Table 2, he has a very nice hand. Very strong hand on the flop. I think at that stack depth, you never want to call 9-8 suited at a position there. So we get him to fold hands like ace-king off in the replayer here, ace-queen, diamonds, a float like king-queen of spades that didn't bet the turn. However, I think that hand really wants to bet the turn. And then he's in a tough spot with a hand like pocket fives as well. And specifically on the 10, I think that we river a lot of hands that can now bet a third, like ace-10. Or king-10. Versus this player, I'm going to bet a third. I think having bets on this board is fine as well. You have to be careful on boards with the low pairs because the big blind has more 2x than you do. I think we're supposed to get raised something like 30% of the time here. I don't think that's happening versus this player. Can go really greedy here and bet a third. All based on the assumption that this player is a recreational. And yeah, I kind of like that. This line, yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. You know, check, 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 overbet. It doesn't make sense because the 7, you didn't pick up really a new hand class that wants to overbet. If you had a hand that wants to overbet the river, you would have bet the flopper turn. So having overbets on this river, it would only make sense for a hand like King 7, Jack 7, or Pocket 7s, and all those hands block the calls that I can have. So you would never want to overbet those hands. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So yesterday I read that PokerStars is trialing a new reward system that is more similar to the Supernova Elite program that they had back in the day, which incentivizes volume-driven play. And I'm wondering what the games are going to be like. I don't think the high-stakes games will change at all, really. I think the high-stakes games will remain. This is really close versus the size. I'm going to call. Yeah, I don't think the high-stakes games will change. Like anything 5-10 and higher will remain basically the same. But I think that the game that will change the most is 200 zoom and I guess 500 zoom. I think you're going to see a lot more rake back grindy regs, which should increase the size of the pool and should make it run more often. There's a lot of regs in 500 or 200 that aren't able to beat the game without rake back, I would say. So you might see the resurgence of a lot of those types of regs. Eights with the 8 of diamonds can bet this flop for sure. I still think it wants to check more than it bets though. And I think we will check call the turn. If he uses the proper size, I guess we'll check fold. The proper size for him should be overbet on this turn after we check. Because the types of hands that he wants to bet are all strong enough to overbet. Table 1, I think we will have a check back range, but not ace-king with the king of diamonds. I think we will bet fold. Yeah, bet fold on this board versus a jam. And versus a min raise, I think we're indifferent. This size is the worst of any of the options. Yeah, oh man, it's so close. You know, I say I'm going to bet fold, and then I look at the spot, and I think, like, with the king of diamonds, maybe we do have to bet call. It's so close either way. Like, there's no way that calling this would be a huge mistake, and I don't think folding this would be a huge mistake, but I think it's more likely that the more I'm thinking about the spot, the more likely I think it is a mistake to fold. So yeah, I'm gonna call. It's very, very close. I don't know what this line is. I think 8's the way that the hand played out. The 8 of diamonds isn't very relevant, but I think the 8 of spades is relevant in that it does block too many bluffs. Yeah, very close with ace-king with the king of diamonds there. Very, very, very close. We'll use this as a 4-bet on an 89. On a 16, we'll fold the king-queen off with the 200 zoom rig structure. even though we're facing a smaller-ish 3-bet size. We'll open the 10-6 suited here, small blind versus button. Small blind versus big blind. Yeah, I will use this as a 4-bet some of the time, low frequency, and on 87 we'll use it as a 4-bet. So my first thought on this board is that we have a lot of hands that want to check back. Like a lot of hands I want to check back. Yeah. So many hands that want to check back. Like jacks, queens, kings without a diamond, any ace-x that 4-bet. And I think all things considered, this hand will check back. At least some of the time. So he picks up pocket 3s and pocket 5s on the turn. I'm going to guess that the small blind is supposed to bet a lot of hands that are complete total air that I think a lot of people are going to miss. So the spot might end up under bluffed. However, obviously we're not folding the turn. We beat hands that he could be betting for value, and even if he's under bluffing, we're never folding a hand like this. The river is starting to get too crazy to go all in. I think we just check it back. I think he can play a hand like 9s with a diamond this way. Maybe. Or just 10-9 of diamonds. Save some money there. We'll check back on table 2. And we'll check back again on table 2. Going to replace this 200 zoom with a 510. It looks like a table start is happening and there's a seat open. Since we can't seem to get our zoom game filled, we might have to have a 510 and a 200 zoom if the 500 doesn't pull up some players. Checking range, or at least extremely high frequency on table 1. And I don't think our hand really wants to check raise. It doesn't really push equity. I think hands that want to check raise on this board are hands like 7s, 8s, 9s, ace 6, 5x, 4x, different heart combos. But now on this turn, I do think we play small overbet. And I think my hand wants to mainly overbet. You know, it being double draw, maybe we size down a little bit. We don't want to go for huge overbets, but I think somewhere around pot is preferred. Looks like the 500 is dying here. Oh, just as I say that, someone joined the pool. So on table one on the turn here, I think we want to do a lot of checking and then some infrequent small betting, whether that small betting is a third, whether it's half. I don't think there's much large betting going on here. And I think my hand on an 8 will definitely check, and I think my hand in general just wants to check. So the size is okay in a splitting strategy, but again, I just feel like this is it's a similar spot to what I was talking about before, where this is just very often hand play. And you'll have a hand like 4-5 or, you know, king 7 of diamonds, something like that. Something that needs protection. And you won't see a lot of nut hands in your opponent's range. Like, I don't expect to see sets or straights very often. It wouldn't be crazy to see a jack. And I think with the 9 of spades, we're going to call here. He doesn't have as many bluffs that have the 9 of spades because he can't float 9 of spades hands on the flop, but he can float a hand like king 9 of hearts. So yeah, we're going to call. Yeah. Gonna play a hand here against Mr. Yusuf. So if he checks, I think this hand is going to basically pure bet the flop, or at least very high frequency. And if he bets, we obviously have an easy fold. So table one, we're doing a lot of checking on all of these boards where the big blind has a rather large trips advantage. On a 94, jacks might bet. You know, if you're playing a betting range. I also think that just checking range on this board is very, very reasonable. And now when we still have such a lockdown on the board, I do like checking again with jacks. If the turn brought a new card that made him have a lot of hands that could pay us off, then I wouldn't mind betting jacks. And now on the river, blocking a jack isn't that relevant. I think we want to check and allow him to bet when he has an ace, I believe. Yeah, I don't think he ever ends up having a jack anymore. I obviously wouldn't mind betting my hand as well. So I think we want 2 raise sizes on the river. One for... Do we want 2 raise sizes? I mean, I'm overthinking this versus a recreational player. I'm just going to raise big and try to get hero called by an ace. Or hope he was trapping with a hand like, I don't know, ace-6. And we get hero called by an ace. This is the same player who I considered trying to bluff him off an ace earlier, and I'm glad I didn't. It did seem ambitious at the time, and I think it's... Not that his play is bad, by the way. I think that his play is absolutely fine here. I just mean at the speed at which he called, I just have a feeling that I wasn't going to get him to fold the ace in the other spot. So versus that bet size on table 2, we're going to have an easy call. And versus the double barrel, I think we just fold 6s now. River, very interesting actually. I think I'm going to block, and it may or may not be allowed, but I like it in practice. I think this maybe is slightly too thin, but I still like it. Gonna have 2 sizes here on the river. Gonna have an overbet size for a hand like, you know, ace jack, king jack, a 3, and then gonna have a block. Of course, the benefit to blocking is that when you block a hand like this and he has a hand like king 8 that would have bet himself, you at least set your own price. The downside to blocking, of course, is putting money in with a hand that is too weak would allow you to get raised too thin. And this hand might be allowed anyways, but again, even if it's not allowed, I kind of like it. This spot barreling a 3rd is not as bad as those other spots where people were betting a 3rd. I think this spot is, it's okay. I think half pot is better. Even 66 is better than a 3rd, I think, but could be wrong on that. Not sure exactly how much 10x we're folding. I'd really like a heart to do something here on the river. Gonna open the queen 5 suited with the big blind being a recreational. I can just make life easy for myself and bet quarter range. Don't mind checking back as well. Raising is interesting. I do think that he could find some hands to turn into a bluff. However, the only ones that are natural to turn into a bluff are ones that are worse than mine, like a jack or maybe a queen himself. So all that considered, raising with my hand, I don't really like it. Bluffing the spot, I think, is totally fine. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. So I'm going to play this last hand here. I think versus big bet we can fold king 6 even with the backdoor. All right, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.